Hey, my name is Matt Storr and I repair saxophones for a living, and this is a video about a question I get every once in a while. People say, like, how exactly should I apply oil to rods when I'm installing them on a saxophone? And this is the way that I do it when I work on saxophones. It's not the only way to do it, but this is what I've come to, and I'll show you what I do and why I do it the way I do. So this is the lower stack on a Selmer balanced action baritone. I'm doing some play condition work on this. This was overhauled somewhere else, and I'm kind of doing some tune-up work on it. And part of what I discovered with this horn is that the rods were pretty dirty, and it was also making the work I had to do replacing some adjustment materials a lot easier just to take the whole thing apart. So I actually took the horn most of the way apart, and so I'm putting it back together. And so step one is going to be to make sure everything is super clean, not just the rod itself, but inside the keys. And it seems like a lot of times what's missed is inside the posts and inside the threaded receiver. You can clean this stuff out, but if you don't clean this, when you reinstall, you're going to be pushing oil through and it's going to bring all that stuff with it. So even though this overhaul was fairly recent, when I was taking out rods, most things were fairly dirty in there. So we've got everything totally cleaned up. The pad work is done, the adjustment materials are done, everything works dry. I just now need to install oil, and this is the way I do it. So at the very end of the process, I've got everything uninstalled, and I take heavy oil and I put a drop in the end, like the top side of each hinge tube, so the rod is going to be coming through from that side. And depending on how big the tube is, how long the tube is, I might put less or more oil in there. And we're going to go ahead and install the rod. So I start putting it through from this end, and pretty quickly, and as I do it, I'm twisting it, but pretty quickly, we're going to drag that oil in, and especially from the top one, if we don't apply some more oil to get dragged in, it ends up being pretty dry at the top. So what I do is I take a little bit of oil and I put it on the rod. And then that sort of gets, see as I'm twisting it, sort of gets like smeared onto the rod. And a lot of it gets drawn in. There might be a little bit of like drips on the end. You can wipe that down as it happens if it's doing it. We'll add a little more, and as you can see, maybe from where you are, there's a little bit of buildup of oil happening right here. I'm keeping an eye on that. I would like it to not drip. I don't mind it building up a little bit, but I don't want it to drip on the horn. And it's kind of getting dragged into the saxophone. Maybe even, okay, so got a little bit of a drip forming, so I'm just going to wipe that up. There's my excess oil, not a lot. Okay, and we're reaching the end here. Now I'll usually like take a little piece at the end, and sometimes right as the end I might see like a little bit of oil pushing through the threads. Did not there. Now if I've got like any extra oil pushing through the gaps, like I've got some here, clean that up. How you do it will depend on what you've got on hand, but I try and get that stuff all the way cleaned up. Anything, any oil on the exterior is just going to attract dust. And there we go. A fully oiled hinge rod. Hope you found that helpful, useful, informative. Like I said, this is only how I do it. There's more than one way to do this. You can get a lot of penetration by wicking oil in. Typically, you have to use a thinner oil to get more full penetration, and I want a thicker oil that really coats and stays where I put it. If it's thin enough to go in through here, I feel like it's probably thin enough to eventually weep out through there. And also if you do stuff at these junctures, I feel like sometimes that can make those junctures oily and then pull stuff in, but of course you can wipe it down after you wick it in. But that's the other way to do it, probably the most common way to do it, and the way I was taught to do it, was actually have the horn assembled at the end of an overhaul and then wick oil in. But I like a little thicker oil. I feel like it stays on there longer, and helps quiet things down and keep things real smooth. If it's super, super thick, it might cause this to feel sluggish, but this stuff is pretty thick. It'll kind of stand up on a bead on my finger, right? And I feel like it does a great job for saxophones. Too thick for flutes, but great for saxophones. So something like that. The stuff I use is the heavy oil from Kraus. A similar oil that I know of is the heavy oil from Music Medic. All right, hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching.